Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm Dave Cummings, and I'm here with Disney animator and director Tony Bancroft. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Glad to.
thanks a lot for being here. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your movies for a long time, and now with more of a family connection with my daughter studying under you, I just really felt like I wanted to talk to you about some of these important topics. But before we get into some of the other things that I really want to talk about today, I do have one question from a fan, a local young lady here in San Diego where I live. Her name is Emma, and Emma's a rising ninth grader, and she wants to be an animator. And so when Emma heard that I was going to be interviewing you, she said, "Oh, would you please ask Tony, what things would you recommend that she does now that'll prepare her for a career in animation later? And how do you personally get past artist's block?"
Ooh, two different questions. The first one, these are both great questions. And the first one I would say, animation, drawing in general, artistry, any kind of artwork and creativity is just like sports. You have to practice to get better at it. So just like you see Michael Jordan and how his routine for practicing to be one of the best when it comes to basketball, we as artists need to draw every day. So that's the first thing I would say to Emma is make sure you're drawing all the time. Make sure you're exploring color and design. And it starts by just looking at the world itself and drawing things that you see. Your little brother, your little sister, your dog, your cat, and then ultimately go to the zoo and draw other kinds of animals and keep developing as an artist by challenging yourself constantly. And then the second question, what was the second question again? It was
how do you get around artist's block? How do you get past it if you feel stuck?
I mean, that's a tough one for all artists because their artist block is a real thing. You can hit a point where you just like aren't coming up with any new and creative ideas. I like to look at old sketches in my sketchbook and conjure up new ideas that way. Or if it's a job that I'm on, sometimes I just have to work through that artist block. I might not feel like drawing or feel like my drawings are very good, but I still have a deadline. So the workhorse in me is like, I gotta meet my deadline. So whether I feel motivated or not creatively, I gotta keep working through that until I hit something that I'm happy with. So sometimes it's stopping and looking at the internet or looking at old sketchbooks or being inspired by somebody else's work. And other times it's just bearing through it and just working through it.
Well, let me follow up on that. I've read that when you were a kid, you loved to draw Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes and create characters of your own, all kinds of fun stuff. Now that art is a job, how does the job change the creative process? The pressures, like you said, working for a client and so on.
Well, when I was in school growing up as a young artist and just getting into art and creativity, and all the way through college, I could kind of draw and create what I wanted to. And oftentimes I started out by copying. That's kind of the first phase, right, of a young artist is you're copying other people's work. So I would trace and draw over the Peanuts characters when I was a little kid. And then ultimately I started creating my own characters. And then after that, in college, I started really kind of thinking about how can I make my characters look as good as a professional quality, and reaching those goals really pushed me to that next level. But when you get into the workforce, you don't get to draw exactly what you want to do. You don't get to paint what you want to paint. You have to you're assigned certain things you have to draw and paint. So ultimately you have to please the client, no matter what it is. If it's a big studio or if it's a small little, plumbing company that you're doing a logo for, you have to please the client. So that forces you to kind of be creative within a box. And ultimately that's okay. But you also need to kind of pull away from that box so you could be openly creative, doing things that you want to do, draw things that you want to draw. So I do have to take breaks sometimes, and the weekends are good for that.
Yeah, you mentioned this box. Is having boundaries actually freeing in some ways then with art?
It really is. Yeah, I mean, particularly like when I have an assignment. Right now I'm working on a film, Space Jam 2. It's already been announced, so I think I could say that. And I'm animating a lot of the Looney Tunes characters, which I'd never drawn before. And so the box that I'm in right now is I have a certain scene the characters have to do something in particular to fit into that scene. They have to have a certain emotion and acting. They have to say a certain thing. So there's lip sync that I have to hit on certain frames. There's definitely restraints in a box there. And then on top of it, I didn't create Bugs Bunny, so I'm trying to imitate how Bugs Bunny looked in the 1950s by Chuck Jones, who was the guy that really made the quintessential Bugs Bunny. So I'm trying to imitate somebody else's design of a character that's not mine, doing things that I don't have any control over, but I'm trying to create within that box. I'm trying to imbue Bugs Bunny with some of me, some of my personality, and some of my way and viewpoint of how I think Bugs Bunny would act in this certain situation. And that's the acting part. That's the really, truly creative part that I enjoy, because so much of that box is already determined, but I can have a lot of freedom even within that box to create the performance that I want.
Of all the various characters you've designed and created and brought to life for us, which one feels the most like you? Which one afterwards have you looked at and said, oh gosh, that's me?
There's Pumbaa and Kronk come to my mind the most. Pumbaa from The Lion King and Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. And probably Pumbaa I have more of an affinity for, more of a connection to than Kronk. Probably because I'm heavy and jovial as opposed to big and strong and dumb. Although, I could be dumb too. But I really think that I have a better connection with jolly old Pumbaa than I do Kronk. And so over the years, I've probably drawn him more than any other character I've ever worked on. And I did help to create that final design. So there's a certain ownership I have over that character, and he really feels like I put a lot of myself into him. So he does feel like me.
Yeah. I know when I look at your work, I see a lot of 2D animation. I know that so much is moving 3D, or has over the last decade or more gone 3D. What would you say to someone who says, if it's not 2D, if it's not on paper, it's not really animation?
I mean, I applaud that. I think it's a bit of an old school way of thinking, because let's face it, even before CG animation, with Toy Story and Pixar and all that came about, there was still other forms and other mediums of animation, whether it be cell animation or like painting on glass, or stop motion, right? Like Gumby and things like that. Those things were around and existed before CG. CG has just added another level of animation medium to everything. And I don't know, I kind of applaud all of it. I love animation in general so much that I think they can all coexist. And I think for a new student that's coming up that's like, only 2D for me, I think it can be a little limiting for employment later on.
Especially a new and upcoming animator, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, so I want to ask a question about the process.
Sure.
Your book's fantastic, by the way, and I'm going to put a link to it along with this. Yeah, I had so much fun reading this. But on page 40, you really kind of lay out the creative process from start to finish. If you remember, you've got kind of a big outline there where you talk about starting with the concept first, and what is it, and why do we care, the why of the story. You move it in right away into the business, which surprised me that the business end had to come in so quickly with budget and schedule and hiring your team. Then you get into pre-production, which is way more intense than I ever expected it to be. Writing the script, designing your characters, designing your locations, recording voice, etc., storyboarding and animatics. Then you get into production, which is where I figured all the work was going to be. But I'm starting to get a sense that there's a lot of work leading up to production. And then there's post-production, of course, as well. So in this whole process, help me as an outsider to understand what keeps you up at night. Where in this whole process is your blood pressure the highest?
I mean, I would say probably in pre-production. That's probably one of the more difficult elements of. It's really, I liken it to if you have kids and they grow up, and at first there's all this promise, right? They're newly born. It's like a new idea at that stage. A new idea for a story is like a little baby, and it's exciting, and there's all this great potential, and it looks glossy and wonderful and cuddly, and everybody loves a baby, right? So that's the idea. And then as you get into pre-production, that's when it's more like the teenage years, and it gets a little pimply, a little awkward, and certain elements of it grow a little bit more than others, like big feet on a teenage boy or something like that, where they get clumsy. So the story at that point is the most volatile, where you have to kind of go back to, what do I love about the early concept, that baby that I love so much, and how can I mold that awkward teenager back into that element of and make it into the adult that it ultimately needs to become, a mature story, a mature product. And so that pre-production phase is tough, because you have to kind of remember what you love about the concept and the story, and really be careful of turning the wrong way, because that's when you have the most influence from, especially if it's a big studio film, executives and other people are clamoring to get their ideas in there. You have a big staff of other artists and stuff, which is exciting too. They're all additive and creating new things, but you have to, as a director, you have to be that funnel to take only the best ideas, so that you can nurture that awkward teenage stage into something successful.
So is pre-production, is it fair to say that that's when you're at the highest risk of maybe vision drift, sort of getting off track because of all the voices?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And you're always plussing something. That was something that I learned early on at Disney, is that idea of plussing something, making it better, so that when it comes to you at this stage or the next stage or the next stage, our job as artists at Disney was always to take it as it comes on your desk and improve it, so that when it goes to the next element, the next stage, they can make it even better. And it's very much an assembly line process, making an animated film, if you want to liken it to that, where we're all doing our certain jobs. But for the director, you're kind of overseeing, of course, everything. So you have to keep that vision of what you want to make alive in your mind, and try not to be distracted by so many different elements.
Plussing sounds honestly really stressful. If in my job as a college professor, people were handing things off to me and saying, "This is the best I can do. Now you have to make it better," that would definitely keep me up at night.
Yeah, I mean, it can be stressful, but I also think that's where you're given a certain box to play in, and that's when you can be the most creative too, because then you have a challenge placed on your shoulder. And I think people do better. I know, as me as an animator and an artist working at Disney, when something came on my desk, I was so excited, because I was excited by the opportunity to make it better. How can I really breathe new life into this scene or this character or this design, whatever it was, that it'll ignite the interest of the audience even more.
Well, how much stress? That's a great point. How much stress then is good, and at what point does it become like distress and start breaking down the creative process and everything that goes into it?
I think it's when you feel like you have too many things, even too many good things, can be stressful. I remember times when on Lion King, we were behind the gun on the schedule, and I started having a stack of scenes, and they were all scenes that I was really excited about. Any individual scene, it was like, Pumbaa saying, "She's gonna eat me," or it was, Pumbaa singing Hakuna Matata with Timon, or different elements from the movie, all out of order, but they're all sitting on my desk. I can't wait to get to them. But it was the stack of them, and the constant executives coming by my desk that were saying, "Okay, we need you to get this one done by this Friday. The next one is next Friday. The one after that is Tuesday." And it's that schedule mounting on me that took the fun out of it, and that made it stressful.
Oh, interesting. So maybe the tipping point is when it's no longer fun for you, and you realize, I'm not enjoying the pressure and I'm not enjoying the job at this point. This is
Yeah.
becoming harmful to the creative process rather than helpful.
Yeah, and I had friends. There's a specific friend I have in mind right now, but I won't say his name. When I was working at Disney, that folded under that pressure. He started to produce scenes that were not of the quality standard that was expected of a Disney animator, and because of that, he got demoted. He was given a character. He had a great opportunity on The Lion King, I'm thinking of specifically, and unfortunately, he folded under the pressure of expectations, and he didn't feel like he could meet those expectations anymore, and therefore the executives, the bosses above us, had to make a choice to take him out of that situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think that the resilience that's needed to be able to perform at your best under these high pressure situations is it inborn? Is it sort of this God-given quality, or can you learn it over time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a big sports fan, but I do think of Michael Jordan and his pursuit of excellence, that is so obvious. And he had this work ethic that he had to develop over time. I think there's a certain amount of gifting that we're given by the Lord. And I've always felt that gifting. And some of that is, a mental freedom to be able to go to a place and not feel the stresses. That could be a real gifting, I think. And then others is like things about, just having a sense of, I got to get this done, and I will at no cost, no expense, I will get this done. And I think that is something that can be taught also, and that work ethic can be taught and developed. But I think there is some element of gifting in that too that's helpful.